I grew up in New York City.
New Haven, Connecticut.
Denver, Colorado.
Born in Moldova.
In Israel.
Boston.
Frankfurt, Germany.
Baltimore, Maryland.
Brooklyn, New York.
The Bronx.
I remember when somebody asked me, how come that there's so many people from the East out here? I said, because that's as far west as you can go.
Coming to California was an opportunity to start over.
Always had wanted to move to California.
I wanted a Shabbat community.
I wanted to start an internet company.
Moving from the East Coast to the Bay Area was difficult.
Not originally in any way an enthusiast.
It's certainly a struggle here to participate Jewishly.
On Passover, you couldn't find a store that sold matzahs.
I hated it the first 6 months.
A little more spread out, a little more hidden sometimes.
A little bit more challenging to find it.
I struggled. I went to different shuls and services.
Once you find them, it's family all over again.
San Francisco soon felt like home.
And then I felt so free when I came to the Bay Area. There was this incredible openness.
My idea of bohemian heaven.
Hippies and peace and love.
Just a little bit of less pressure.
I was myself. I was in my element.
That's a very special kind of environment.
We're on a kind of frontier here.
We loved the interest in innovation.
Community of people who are seeking out the
There
future.
are people looking for something new.
No one's looking down on anybody, and no one's tisk-tisking.
That has transformed my life.
California was incredibly good to my family.
We have this homegrown family now.
It is where I belong.
Here, who wants to fight? We're living in paradise. My name is Rabbi Moshe Trager. I've lived here in the South Bay for the last couple years. I am a full-time mohel, which means I spend my days meeting interesting Jewish families and helping them enter their children into the ancient covenant of the Jewish people known as a bris.
My name is Melanie Aron, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was serving as a rabbi in Brooklyn in a small congregation, and my husband was teaching physics at the City College uptown. And when an opportunity opened up for him in Santa Cruz, I began to interview out on the West Coast.
I spent most of my life, pretty much all of my life, on the East Coast, growing up in Boston, and then most recently the last 15 years in Philadelphia. There's a lot of mohels in Philadelphia, 12 or 13, and there are very few here in the Bay Area.
Everyone was teasing me in New York that I was going to California where it was going to be so laid back and I was going to sort of turn into a different person. But I got to Silicon Valley, and I don't think that's part of the same California that people talk about.
I think what mostly attracted us was just the beauty and the adventure and the unlimited amounts of attractions that a family has at their avail. I mean, in Philadelphia, after you've been to the museum and after you've been to the aquarium, you're sort of stuck on where to go.
I came to a congregation that was 10 years old and was still finding itself. We were in a building that had been a school administrative building. We wandered around for the high holidays every year to a different facility. Even services, that we sort of set up the chairs and we had to fold up the chairs.
Well, it's certainly a struggle here to participate Jewishly on the same level we did in, let's say, Philadelphia. There's just much more choice in schools, there's much more choice educationally, there's much more choice in restaurants, in synagogues.
So I've always felt that out in Silicon Valley, we were the Jewish frontier. There was nothing that you could assume, and there was nothing that you could take for granted. When I was a rabbi in Brooklyn, the whole city, in a sense, was Jewish. When I came out here to California, that was not the case.
I think the biggest, most important difference is that you cannot get a corned beef sandwich in Northern California to save your life.
I'd say the years from 85 to 90, there was just exponential growth in Jewish people moving in to work in the high-tech industry. And so we were welcoming 50 to 60 families every year for about 5 or 6 years. but it was also a little bit overwhelming to get to know all those people and to help them find their connections and help them build the sort of pseudo-extended family that congregation is when you have a population that's, so full of people from other places and without any family roots.
A bris is probably one of the most important religious and cultural things that we do as a Jewish people, and there's a significant difference with how I felt it was done on the East Coast as it is done on the West Coast.
And you couldn't assume people would come to Sukkot or to Shavuos unless you personally invited them, because it was not on their calendar. It was not something that you could take for granted that they would want to do or even know why it was important.
I feel more on the East Coast, even if you're, less connected to a Jewish community, you're a young family, possibly even interfaith, you're having a bris. That's not a question. Grandma will kill you if you don't have a bris.
There are people looking for something new and looking for some kind of adventure. I think it's also a frontier because Jewish life was changing, and it was changing the most on the frontier. We did have an interfaith discussion group in Brooklyn for those younger members of the congregation, but they were a minority of the congregation. I come out here, and my guess is more than half the Jewish children in our school have at least one non-Jewish grandparent.
I wish I had the words to explain how good it makes me feel that in Berkeley, for example, half the Orthodox synagogue, they come from the conservative, they go Friday night. Maybe Saturday morning, they'll go to the conservative synagogue. Everybody goes back and forth, and nobody's labeling each other. I mean, people are just free to express themselves the way they feel they need to express themselves.
Sometimes we'll have the children up on the bima at our No Shush Shabbat, and they're, all lined up, and they're clapping and leading. And most of them don't look like our stereotype of what Jewish kids look like. And that's a good thing, but I think that's something that is part of our frontier, part of how Jewish life is a little bit different out here.
Today I feel like being Hasidic. Tomorrow I want to go sing Kumbaya on the beach, and everybody can do that. And no one's looking down on anybody, and no one's tisk-tisking.
We're a place where it's a little bit easier to try something. We don't have the drag of, we've always done it this way. And we don't have the people whose grandparents were presidents of this congregation, and this is how it was when their grandparents were here. On the whole, there are some very historic congregations in the area. But those of us who are in the newer congregations that were started over the last 25, 30 years are really starting de novo. We're starting out of nothing, and things are a little bit easier in terms of innovating and trying things that 2 years later we stopped doing because they weren't the right thing.
They're as supportive as they are in any other community. They're caring, they're givers. There's organizations, there's people who want to help you, who want you to help other people, and it's a very, very connected community. Just like you'd find in any other community. A little more spread out, a little more hidden sometimes, but once you find them, it's family all over again.
I think that's a nice attitude that the high-tech industry has, that they do understand that not everything you try is going to work. Not every startup becomes Google. And that a person will try 2 or 3 things that don't work before they try something that does work. I think that's an important attitude to have.
It's the weather. Everybody's happy. If it rains and snows, you get ugly, you get miserable, you want to blame somebody else. Here, who wants to fight? We're living in paradise.